The 49ers are on the verge of signing maybe a new starter on defense, but it's not going to be Nick Bosa's brother. Who have the 49ers brought in? Thornhill, Brown, Robinson, and what's next for the 49ers defensive line on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you, as always, at BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. We appreciate you. If you're not subscribed up, make sure you rectify that, and helps us out tremendously. It helps other people find the podcast as well. So wherever you listen, wherever you watch, hit that subscribe button. Pause right now and hit that button, and you want to stay locked on with us as we do this throughout the off season, through draft season, free agency, trades, and come on, the draft season is almost as fun as the regular season. Let's be honest, I love it, and we've got it all broken down for you. Talk about some of the newest San Francisco 49ers. One guy who might be coming, one guy who's not on today's show, and Croc, that is Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa's big brother. Big Bear not coming to the San Francisco 49ers. It looked like maybe he was on his way. Last time we recorded, not going to happen. Joey Bosa chose the Buffalo Bills, and according to reports, a little more money, and Croc, potentially a better chance at a ring now. Do you think if you're Joey Bosa and you're like, maybe I want to stay in California, maybe I want to play with my brother, a little more money to go to Buffalo, and then you start seeing what the 49ers are doing the first couple of days of free agency, and be like, yeah, you know what? I think you might have a better football team in Buffalo right now with all the players that are leaving the San Francisco 49ers, including all the defensive linemen.
I think it's a good signing for Buffalo. And, we talked a lot about Bosa and his inability to kind of stay healthy in recent years. But for a team that's just trying to maybe get a closer, it's like, look, Bosa, we don't need you to ball out all year. You don't have to be the younger version of yourself. But when we need you most, can you make a couple plays? And that's what they're going to be banking on, especially come January. They want to beat the Baltimore Ravens. They want to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So this was a move, I feel like, made for January. The 49ers, they're trying to figure out how to get to January. And I think it was Matt Barrows. He posted a roster, like a depth chart of the 49ers as it stands today.
Yeah.
The sky is not falling. You see a lot of good players. You see plenty of talent on that roster. The sky is not falling at all. You add maybe another couple fillers in the free agency like the 49ers are doing right now to go along with the draft. I think they'll be just fine. Obviously, a guy like Joey Bosa would have definitely helped. But I'll tell you what doesn't help, and we didn't mention this. I don't know how I feel about the Leonard Floyd release. That was one where he was productive. I don't think he was owed a ton of money. Obviously, he could have been a little bit better in his efficiency as a run defender and even with his pass rush win rate. But he was a constant pro, did very well. And you let him go. That was one that was a little questionable. The other things we saw coming, we saw the, Kyle Juszczyk and Hargraves and some of those. I did not see Leonard Floyd coming. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I don't know if that's a move I can get behind out of all the things that they've done. And we thought maybe they were making room for like Joey Bosa. Well, you didn't get Joey Bosa. So now you just let Leonard Floyd go. And again, I'm not saying he's a 15-sack guy, but man, 8.5 sacks. He was productive. He did not miss time. He's always on the field. It was a guy that he was a starter. I don't know if it's just easy to replace that production that you were able to get from him. So that was one out of all the things that I understand with what they're doing. I don't think I care for that. And again, it's not like he was owed $15 million, $20 million. It was like, I don't know, what, $6, $7 million. It wasn't much. That one's still kind of questionable to me.
And it hits you with dead cap to release him too. So it costs you a little bit to get rid of some of these guys. And the 49ers are, I don't know where they are, $86 million in dead cap or something right now. I'll try to find the number. I've got it saved somewhere. But yeah, I want to focus on the defensive line more than anything, because a lot of the moves were something, especially like each move by itself. It's like, yeah, Hargrave, that was an overpay in free agency. He hasn't been the guy that you hope you were paying. It's not surprising that he's gone. Malik Collins didn't like. He's kind of like even lesser version of what we're talking about with Floyd. It's like, well, at least he's a starter, but he wasn't a difference-making player. And so you let him go. Hufanga, they drafted his replacement last year in Malik Mustafa. Deebo Samuel, as soon as the 49ers drafted Ricky Pearsall, it was clear that one of those guys was going to be gone, whether it's Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. You pay Brandon Ayuk, so Deebo Samuel's the odd man out there, right? And so you drafted a first-round player to replace him in the draft last year. Dominic Pooney, you drafted a guard to potentially replace the guy who was in fact, they've done that lineage now twice in a row. Remember when they drafted Aaron Banks, it was for the guy that was becoming a free agent in Laken Tomlinson, and he eventually replaced him after 1 year. And I think that was the idea this time, was to replace Aaron Banks with Dominic Pooney. And it turned out Burford got hurt. Pooney had an opportunity to play, and he had gotten the lineup and didn't leave the lineup. It turned out he's a really good player. And now we can figure out what happens on the other side at guard. But, Aaron Banks, I don't think I would argue that they should have given him $19 million per year. So all of these moves on their own make perfect sense. Dre Greenlaw, he's really banged up. It's really hard to do a long-term contract with him when you're paying so much for the other linebacker next to him already, and Fred Warner and a lot of other big money players. That move makes sense in a vacuum by itself, but it's just all of it happening at once really does feel like, and I can understand why a 49ers fan would look and be like, how are we going to overcome all of these losses? But when you look at each move by itself, a lot of them I don't think are super destructive, because you already have players. Renardo Green is already ready and developed in a starting corner, and you have that prepared. So when Charvarius Ward moves on, you're not replacing Charvarius Ward. You're going to replace, the snaps of the number 3 cornerback now. And the 49ers have brought in some guys. We'll talk about Tre Brown. We'll talk about the latest Juan Thornhill safety that has come in and is going to visit with the San Francisco 49ers this week, potentially be one of the first starters on defense that they've brought in, I think, in Juan Thornhill. And I know we liked him a lot pre-draft, Croc, but I want to focus on the defensive line more, because aside from Aaron Banks leaving in free agency, the offense is going to be relatively similar, especially when you consider you've got a first-round wide receiver who should be ready to step in and play starters reps for Deebo Samuel. You bring in Demarcus Robinson, a veteran receiver there. I want to focus more on the defensive side of the ball and what we're looking at with the defensive line, because if Joey Bosa doesn't come to the San Francisco 49ers, you start looking at the free agent market. There's not a lot of guys out there. Azeez Ojulari is a guy I liked pre-draft, gives you a little juice off the edge as a pass rusher. There's some names, but right now the 49ers need 3 out of 4 starters on the defensive line. And there's not a lot of difference-making players in free agency. The 49ers clearly don't want to spend a lot, and those guys are pretty expensive. The top guys left will probably be a nice little chunk of money. You'd be paying them at least what you were paying Leonard Floyd, and you just released him anyway. And then otherwise...
And real quick, are you replacing his production? Because again, now I'm not saying that he was the most amazing edge rusher for the Niners, but he was fairly productive, and he's out there. And you can't say the same for a lot of other players that have played on the D-line. I mean, even Gross Models and Leonard Floyd came in at the same time. How many games did Gross Models miss?
Yeah, he was banged up a lot, and the best ability is availability, as they say. So right now, Yetur Gross-Matos would be the starter across from Nick Bosa. And I don't even know who the number 3 would be. Drake Jackson can't get over his patellar tendon injury, so I don't even know who the Sam Okuwanu would be out there. Evan Anderson was an undrafted rookie last year. He would start next to Kevin Givens, probably a defensive tackle. Like, that's the defensive line the 49ers have today. And so I think that's where the most work needs to be done. It's the biggest need. I know a lot of fans want an offensive tackle. I mean, they have both returning offensive tackles right now. So I want to talk a little bit more about the defensive line, what the steps are, and is it just a straight draft and develop situation right now for the San Francisco 49ers with so many defensive players leaving? And let's talk about some of the players that are either visiting or have been signed by the San Francisco 49ers. And there is one unit, Croc, on the 49ers that has improved since the start of free agency. Next. Today's episode is brought to you by one of our newest sponsors, Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, which is a big one these days, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can just use Monarch Money to check all of your finances, track all the spending you need, and even plan on your long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts. I know it's hard sometimes to, who's spending what, where's this, where's that, and it really brings it all together with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. So, Croc, the defensive line right now, do you think the 49ers can compete? Let's talk a little bit about what the depth chart looks like after things are starting to slow down after the first wave of free agency. And again, the offense, you have a first-round guy to replace Deebo Samuel. And look, Deebo Samuel wasn't 2021 Deebo Samuel anymore. So you still got Brock Purdy at quarterback, assuming a deal gets done. Might not be easy. We'll see how long that takes. But Brock Purdy at quarterback, hopefully a healthy Christian McCaffrey at running back. They gave the second-round tender to Jordan Mason as the backup running back. Isaac Garando, the fourth-rounder last year. You got Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk, and whenever Brandon Ayuk is ready, you got Jawan Jennings in the meantime. You got Demarcus Robinson, and by the way, I didn't even realize he had sort of a DUI thing he was dealing with, and that's not ideal for your free agent wide receiver edition to not be ready early in the season when you might need someone to replace some snaps for Brandon Ayuk if it takes him a month or whatever of the season to be back from his ACL injury. But you still got George Kittle. You got Trent Williams, hopefully healthy. You brought in Luke Farrell as a free agent to be a block first backup tight end for George Kittle. There's been some talk that, maybe he could even do some Kyle Juszczyk type stuff. And there were times when Kyle Juszczyk was lined up sort of as a tight end, and certainly he could do those. I don't know how much fullback Luke Farrell's going to line up and do. He's probably not going to carry any footballs or anything like that, but he can catch it when it's thrown to him. You got and right now you got a battle at left guard. This is if the season started today with no draft picks and no more second, third wave free agents at it. You got Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, Colton McKivitz, Trent Williams, 4/5 of your starting offensive line, and then you got Ben Barch, who, let's be honest, was playing just as good as Aaron Banks last year, and he could compete with Spencer Burford at the left guard spot, some other young players potentially that can battle there, and some draft picks. So the offense is not that changed, and of course, Kyle Shanahan is the one running the offense. So right now, if you're a 49ers fan, you're not super worried about what the offense looks like, and potentially it's better just from having a full year of Ricky Pearsall with a full offseason and a healthy Christian McCaffrey, a healthy Trent Williams, and maybe you're even a better offense than you were last year. The defense is where things change, and we just talked about the defensive line. And again, let's go back to front. You got Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa. I think they clearly want to bring in some competition at safety. You got Renardo Green and Diamador Lenore as your starting cornerbacks. You got to bring in a number 3-4 guy, and maybe Tre Brown is that guy. More on him in a minute. Linebacker is now a big one. Front seven. Fred Warner is the dude. All pro Fred. D Winters, is he ready to go? Is he ready for prime time? You got the 7th rounder last year, Tatum Bethune, Curtis Robinson, more of a special teamer. And then I mentioned the defensive line already. Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos are your ends. You've got Kevin Givens, Evan Anderson, Jordan Elliott on the interior. It is not a world-beating defensive line. It's not a world-beating front seven, even if you have two guys that could be defensive player of the year candidates in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. But overall, there is not as many holes as you might think, and it's not a complete teardown of the 49ers. And a free agent here or there, some draft picks. This is a team that absolutely is going to – you should not expect the San Francisco 49ers to be a bad football team next year when you look at the roster that they still have left and obviously a lot of offseason to go, Croc.
John Lynch talked about getting younger. When you kind of look at this defense, and I'm looking at Matt Mayoko. I think I said Barrows earlier. He put out a depth chart. It was Matt Mayoko. Not really just young, because Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, Givens has been around for a while now for the 49ers. I actually really like Givens. Obviously, he's never had like a legit opportunity to become a starter. But when you look at some of the other positions, especially the linebacker position with D Winters, he's much younger and hasn't truly been a starter yet. Curtis Robinson, much younger, hasn't truly been a starter yet. even Ronaldo Graham, Malik Mustafa, like those are guys that play very well as rookies, but they also are coming in playing with not much expectation, right? So now what does that look like when, all right, you're the guy, you had a whole offseason. And I think even with Jair Brown, we saw that after his rookie year, he had some ups and downs. Now you head into that second year, all right, you're the guy. And then you start to see, oh man, like, well, can he actually get a little bit better? So you're going to want Jair to get better. And I think 49 bringing in guys like Juan Thornhill is to say, all right, let's put a little pressure on Jair Brown to make sure that he's moving in the right direction. If he's not, we got a veteran that will definitely be able to step in, the guy who started a lot of games in the NFL for a couple of different teams. But I think the defensive line, you're looking for that star power, and that's something the 49ers have. I mean, that's a drastic difference going from, let's say, 2019, where you have Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, D Ford, DeForest Buckner. And then you look at this D-line, it's like Nick Bosa, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, Yuto Gross-Matos. I think that's where the 49ers are Cardinals hurting. Like, where is the star power up front? And I think in the comments, during this showing, most people would say, well, that's what the draft is for. And they're going to have to really hit. And I think they are setting it up right now. They've plugged holes in certain places. They're setting up to go all in on that D-line. And it looks like they need an edge rusher. But, man, how do you pass up on a guy like Graham when you look at that interior of the defensive line right now for the 49ers?
And look, Croc, we've already been talking about Mason Graham and Walter Nolan as two of our favorite picks, potentially for the 49ers at pick 11. That's even more magnified now. And I would add Armand Membo and, maybe – and look, 49ers' most immediate need on the offensive line would be left guard. And if they drafted Membo, if they drafted Will Campbell, that guy would play guard first anyway before he moved out to tackle. But, those four players are probably, if I'm betting, it's going to be one of those guys for the 49ers. And, the team's picking in front of the 49ers is going to have a big say on who's going to be there for them at pick 11. But I'd be shocked if it's a different player than one of those 11 right now with the way things have gone. And, there still could be a Brandon Ayuk trade or something major like that changes the needs and maybe opens your mind up to a potentially different position, a different player there. But it really looks like with the players the 49ers have brought in now, Tre Brown to potentially be that number 3 cornerback for you. Have a veteran player that you can plug in and play that can start some games for you that started games in the NFL. Juan Thornhill. If they sign Juan Thornhill, that's likely a sign that they're going to start him over Jair Brown at safety. I want to talk a little bit more about Juan Thornhill in our evaluations of him pre-draft and what he's been in the NFL. Or at least big time competition for Jair Brown, right? But they're elite. They're still eliminating some of the needs, even if they're kind of ancillary needs, backup tight end, backup players. But they're really just they're really focusing in on a situation where, look, we're going to draft defense. We're going to draft defensive line. We're going to draft front 7 players early. It's going to be probably a linebacker. And it's definitely going to be a couple of defensive linemen. And right now, Croc, if you looked at the team as we just laid it out and you just added, okay, you get to hit. We get to play God. We get to play draft God here. You get to hit on your first 2 draft picks, and it's a defensive tackle in round 1, and that guy's a stud for you, and you plug that into your defensive line. And then maybe round 2, even if it's a one-dimensional guy, maybe it's Ezaraku, who we watched from Boston College. Maybe he's there at pick 43. And you pair a young, speedy pass rusher that can get to the quarterback, and you pair him with Yetur Gross-Matos, who's a little bigger bodied, sort of power end for you. Do you start to see a team that's like, well, that's still a playoff football team, right? With all the other stars and all the other players the 49ers have.
I think you see the direction. And it kind of reminiscent a little bit of what the Rams did last year. You look at where they're going, and it's like, hey, let's get Jared Verse. And he came in and he was awesome as a rookie. Second round, what they do? Oh, let's go get Braden Fisk, right? And there were people talking about him to the 49ers at 31. We were like, it looks more like a day 2 pick. Well, he went day 2 to the Rams, and he was terrific for them in the middle there, right? And, still had some of his hiccups. Talked about the lack of his ability to really stop the run and be stout versus there. But he gave them ability, gave them some pass rush productivity there, getting a bunch of sacks. So that was what they did. They said, man, we can't have enough guys that can get after the quarterback. And I felt like as the season went on, man, how good was that group in January? I mean, they were awesome. How many times they cost Sam Darnold a lot of money? Because everybody's like, oh man, he turned back into a pumpkin. Like, look at Sam Darnold. It's like, well, yeah, these guys had like 18 combined sacks in two playoff games. Like, they didn't just get after Sam Darnold and Minnesota Vikings. They got after the Philadelphia Eagles too, and gave the Rams a chance. I mean, those two guys, they really changed to go along with some of the other young guys that they've drafted in recent years. But that's kind of what we're saying with the 49ers. Well, you already have the stalwart guy. Like, you already have Nick Bosa. Now, what can you do around that? And adding a guy like, Mason Graham, and then the kid out of Boston College, I think that would definitely be a step in the right direction of truly understanding what the plan is for the 49ers. And I think the fans are clamoring for that as well. We didn't mention the offensive line. They'll be upset about that. But the 49ers defense, it wasn't great last year. And you would, if you want to see the best version of Kyle Shanahan and that offense, you need that defense to be able to get some stops and some key stops. And they didn't do it. So you got to get better there.
Yeah, and it's like you can't cry over the guys that left on the 49ers defensive line because they weren't playing that great anyway. The 49ers needed to upgrade from what those guys were already. So can they find those upgrades? That'll be the quickest fix for the San Francisco 49ers. Clearly, they'd be getting younger and more dynamic on the defensive line. But you mentioned the Rams. We saw how the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We've seen these teams with the 49ers, and the further they've gotten away from the meanest, nastiest defensive line possible, the worse of a football team the 49ers have gotten. So it could also go the other way, right? It's like, okay, well, you don't have a difference maker on the defensive line. Maybe that player's not there for you in the first round. Maybe the guy in the second round turns out to be just a rotational player for you, especially early. Maybe Nick Bosa gets beat up a little bit. Maybe he misses some games. You could potentially have a really just terrible defensive line as well. And that's not going to fly. So it's a clear need, and it's a huge need. And it's probably the most important thing to build your football team outside of head coach and quarterback on the defensive line. And so you can't just gloss over where the 49ers are right now and say, oh, they're fine. There was some of these player exits that were planned in free agency. It's not a big deal. It's still a big deal until it's not a big deal anymore. But there is a pathway to be a team that might not be as rebuildy as it feels like with how many players have left the San Francisco 49ers. And to be honest with you, it's future seasons and losing other pieces and other big name guys that we just talked about that could really start to break down what the 49ers have been and what the 49ers still are in some places. And you've got to you've got to really nail your draft to make sure that you do smooth out that tail, so you don't have other off seasons that are like this that feels like, man, it's falling apart because we're missing out on this player and this player and this player and this player, and there's not really anything ready to replace them. You can't do that multiple off seasons in a row, but you can go to the playoffs and be a good football team and have a lot of dead money and get your books straight, as we just saw from the Buffalo Bills, who did this last year. It was like, oh, this is a transitional year. The Bills are going to stink. Nope, they're not going to stink because they got the coach and the quarterback right. The Denver Broncos had like 80, 90 million in dead cap, much like the 49ers last year. It's like, oh man, Sean Payton's not going well for the Denver Broncos. They drafted a quarterback that was like the sixth best on everybody's board. Is that going to go okay? It went just fine, and they were a playoff team in a tough division. They were a competitive football team in a tough division. They playoff caliber. So that's where the San Francisco 49ers are right now after 3 days of free agency. Some specifics on some of the players the 49ers have brought in and that are visiting: Juan Thornhill, Tre Brown, Demarcus Robinson. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, and even bet on who's going to cut down the nets at the end of the tournament. I love Turning Time. It's so much fun. I love betting on the NFL draft. That is so much fun. If you listen to this show, you might have a little edge over the house as well. I think it's one of the best ways you can make money on the NFL, is even more so than during the season, is NFL draft props. You can also bet on your San Francisco 49ers to win the Super Bowl. Much better odds this offseason than the odds you could get in past off seasons to make that bet. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. Love the FanDuel app. And all you got to do is download the app or visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That is FanDuel.com. Okay, Croc. So we are looking at the San Francisco 49ers and where they're at, and they are starting to make some additions. And one unit that has gotten better, Croc, is special teams. And you might be looking at the defense, might be looking at all the big names that are leaving the San Francisco 49ers, but a new special teams coordinator and some more bodies that can go in there and play special teams. And clearly it's something the 49ers want to be better at. And it's something they did. And almost every single free agent the 49ers have added can be an asset for the team on special teams. So I want to point that out, that while it looks weird, especially with the defense and how many players have left, and look, 9 starters from last year have left. That's not super easy to replace in one offseason. One thing they're doing is adding players who can play special teams. And Richie Grant is one. Tre Brown is another. And Tre Brown is an interesting player. And actually, we've got a little quote from Tre Brown himself about being a San Francisco 49er, Croc. The 27-year-old corner, he was a starter with the Seattle Seahawks. He got banged up. Akella Witherspoon ended up jumping into the lineup. And so Tre Brown was kind of relegated to, number 3 cornerback duty for the Seattle Seahawks. But he's down to scrap it up in press man. He's not the biggest guy, but he's a scrapper, and he's going to be sort of one of those fan favorites. I've got some Seahawks fans, friends, Croc, and they're like, hey, man, you got a good one here. He's one of those guys that for sure is going to fit the culture for the San Francisco 49ers. And this is what Tre Brown had to say, Croc, about joining the San Francisco 49ers. He said, oh, no, I lost it. I got to pull it up here. He said on Twitter, quote, dealt with injuries last year. That slowed me down, but we 100% Niners getting a good one. I can promise you that. So that's the scouting report on himself, Tre Brown, newest San Francisco 49er DB.
I hope he's right. And, you want a guy to come in and have that type of expectations for himself and understand, hey, essentially what he's saying, I didn't play as well as I could have played. And there's reasons behind that. But I'm going to be 100% healthy and ready to go for the 49ers. And those are the type of guys with that mindset that I want in the secondary. Now, he's not the biggest guy we looked at, listed at 5'10", 185 pounds. Where he's going to play? Is he going to be an outside guy? Is he going to play more so in the nickel? You kind of look at what the 49ers have right now at cornerback. On the outside, you have Renardo Green. You have, obviously, Diamador Lenore. Lenore obviously can slide into that nickel in nickel packages, and you bring in somebody else on the outside, or he can stay outside and you have somebody else that can play in that nickel, and maybe that's Tre Brown. But I'm excited to see where they use him. But most importantly, I'm excited for a guy that hasn't even signed yet, and that's Juan Thornhill.
Yeah.
Now, I got tagged a bunch of times. Shout out to, I know who listens to Locked On 49ers, man. It's those people. I'm getting tagged left and right just from the reports that Juan Thornhill is visiting the 49ers. People probably remember my pre-draft love of this guy. He was my safety one. It was without a doubt. And there were some guys they liked over him, like the NFL, and a couple guys that went ahead of him, but they liked who's that safety from Delaware? Went to the Chargers.
Nasir Adderley.
Like people like Nasir Adderley. You guys are tripping. Juan Thornhill, that's one of the better safeties I've seen, just from an ability standpoint, versatility standpoint. A guy that could play too high in the slot, could play outside, moved well, went to the combine, blew it away, tested extremely well, ran way faster than I ever expected. And then his rookie year, he tears his ACL. And I think since then, I don't know if we've been able to see the best version of him. I don't know if we ever will, but he played on a good secondary with the Cleveland Browns. And if you're able to play with the Cleveland Browns and start, because they had him, they had Delpit, and then obviously they had the corners with Newsome and Newsome and Ward, and I'm blanking on the other kid from Texas A&M, the corner Emerson. All right, but they had a terrific secondary, and he played and he started, right? So this is a guy that has ability, and I hope the 49ers bring him in. And you don't have to bring him in to be the starter. He doesn't have to be what Croc thought he would be pre-draft. But if he can come in and push one of the other younger safeties, for starting time or packages, and maybe even push one of them off the field, I think you get better for that. So you want that kind of competition. You want to bring that in because that's what's going to bring the best out of everybody. Jair Brown, you can't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to come in. I'm the starter. Like, nope, damn, I got this dude breathing down my neck. They just signed him. They would love to bring him in. That's how this, whether it's NFL, college, they are looking for your replacement all the time.
Yep.
They're looking for ways to get cheaper. They're looking for reasons to not have to bring you back. You have to give them every reason to make sure that they keep you. They're bringing in guys every Tuesday. I saw this and felt it, especially as an undrafted guy. Every Tuesday, they got guys coming to the facility working out to take your spot, and they want them to take it. So you got to be on your stuff. And Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, they have been put on notice.
Yep.
And I'm excited just to see how they respond. And hopefully they respond at a high level and hold their spots. And that just means you got 2 long-term safeties.
Yeah, we'll see how that meeting goes with the 49ers. And depending on how much he signs for will be a pretty big indicator of what the 49ers think of him and if he's penciled in to be that starting free safety or if he's just competition. But he's a 6-year veteran. He's won a couple of Super Bowls. The 49ers have played against him in a Super Bowl. A couple of Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was there for 4 years, signed as a free agent with the Cleveland Browns. And he's been the type of player we've been talking about. It's like, okay, the Niners have a bunch of strong safeties. They need a legit free safety, a guy that can range out there on the back end. And Juan Thornhill is that, even post ACL. And for those who don't remember, Juan Thornhill was a little bit of a freak coming out, and his combine was ridiculous. He was 6'1", 205. He ran 4.42, Croc, 44-inch vertical. He had like a 1.52 10-yard split in his 40-yard dash. So short area quickness, long speed, super explosive player, showed range, showed instincts as a safety. I think he's exactly what the 49ers need potentially back there, manning center field, a little bit more speed, a little bit more range.
Listen, so we talked about him pushing guys for certain spots, and hey, you guys, I'm breathing down your neck. I just looked at his stats just to see games played and all that. You know, it shows game played, game started, all that. If they sign him, I think they're signing him to start. He's pretty much started every game that he's played in pretty much throughout his 6-year career. I mean, his rookie year, 2019, started 16 out of 16 games. The next year, he only started half the games. The year after that, he started 12 out of 17. 2022, started 16 games, 16 out of 17, and maybe they sat their starters for that last portion. And then back-to-back years, here's the hiccup. He has missed some time, but in 2023 and 2024, both seasons for Cleveland Browns, he only played in 11 games each year, but he started all 11 both years. So every game that he was healthy for Cleveland Browns, he started. That was 22 of them over 2 seasons. This is a guy, you look at that, they're not looking to bring him in to be any kind of backup to these young guys. Like, now you're coming in, you are a starter in the NFL. I didn't realize I knew he started towards ACL one of them years. I didn't realize it was to that extent that now he's been starting every single game.
Yeah, and that might be why that the signing isn't happening and why they're bringing him in. They might want to get a little MRI, maybe move those ligaments around, make sure he's healthy before they make that signing. But it would seem that if they did sign Juan Thornhill, it would be to be the starting free safety for the San Francisco 49ers and knock one of those other needs off before they hit the NFL draft. You're talking about games played. Maybe the most impressive thing for Demarcus Robinson, the newest signee, and it's not a big money contract for Demarcus Robinson either. So whatever happens there, it's not like he's brought in to replace Deebo Samuel, but he's a player who's started games in the NFL, started all 17 games for the Los Angeles Rams last year. And, 505 receiving yards. He's been around 400 or 500 yards almost every year of his career. Another former Kansas City Chief, by the way. He's been in the league a long time, and he doesn't miss games, Croc. These are his games played since 2016 with the Kansas City Chiefs. 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 17, 17, 16, 17. He doesn't miss games, and the 49ers need healthy football players. So that's maybe the biggest thing that Demarcus Robinson has going for him, the 9-year vet. One thing, though, is they didn't get younger there at wide receiver because he's actually almost 2 years older than Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's 29 years old right now. Demarcus Robinson's going to turn 31 in September. So they didn't necessarily get younger at wide receiver, but they did get healthier. He's a guy that's played a lot of games. He's more of a possession type of wide receiver, gives you someone who can play, who can start for you if needed, but isn't a player that's expected to start, and he's not paid like he's someone that's expected to start. And so I like this signing for the 49ers, a good budget signing there with Demarcus Robinson.
talked to one of my buddies about it, and he was asking about Robinson. I said, I think he's a guy that ideally for your team is a legit 4, right? So if somebody goes down, this is a guy with plenty of experience. He can step in and play. I think Chris Conley had kind of been that guy for the 49ers in recent years. So essentially that's what you're looking for to kind of replace that. Obviously, throughout his career, he's been more productive than Conley had been. But the 49ers, ideally, I'm pretty sure they'll tell you, hey, we want Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall to be our guys. And if he's our 4th receiver, and then you got the rookie out of Arizona last year that will probably be your wide receiver 5 and potentially a return guy. But I think you like that group of 5 receivers.
Yeah,
and I think a signing like that kind of makes it to where maybe the 49ers don't go into day 2 thinking about drafting a receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah, you bring in a veteran wide receiver. You have 2 rookies from last year. You bring in 1 veteran safety in Richie Grant, special teams guy, backup type of a free safety. Bring in another safety potentially in Juan Thornhill. Tells you they're trying to knock off some of those needs. They're not going to be trying to draft a safety early. They're probably not going to be trying to draft a wide receiver early at least. And, there's a lot of rounds, a lot of picks. Niners have 11 picks. They can make some picks. But they're really telling you what their draft plans are because they're trying to knock off some of these needs. So it's just not it's not going to be just straight best player available. It's probably going to be best player available at a number of positions. And those positions are probably on the offensive and defensive lines. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Get your questions in for us. If you have anything that you want us to talk about, any topics you want us to cover as we go through free agency, we're going to focus in on a little bit more draft now, do some more draft reports. Maybe the free agency can inform what direction we go with some draft prospects. At BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Let us know what prospects you want us to scout as we build our 49ers big board for 2025. And of course, you can drop a comment on YouTube, subscribe while you're there. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.